What's going on, Jerome's? Your Minnesota Vikings have their initial 53-man rooster set, and general manager adofo-mensah playing a little bit of Moneyball. Not really, but it's okay. We like the meme and the graphic. But Kwesi is cooking, making some moves, shucking some grooves, and doing all that stuff. And the Vikings 53-man roster, I smell a dozen Jerome Bardys in the next 10 years. I don't know. And also practice squads going to start being formed at 11 a.m. Central Time today. But we have 10 DAs takeaways from the Vikings' initial 53-man roster. First up, all in on Jaron Hall. So the Vikings carrying 3 quarterbacks on the 53. Notable, most teams carry only 2, but Jaron Hall on the 53, protected from waivers, concerned about teams potentially picking him up, and the whole thing about it is that the Vikings weren't in on Trey Lance. Vikings probably won't be in on any quarterbacks that have just been cut, even like Bailey Zappi is out there, but Kevin O'Connell's been very glowing about Jaron Hall. Kyle Sluter's said great things about Jaron Hall. Kurt Benkert, quarterback school, said great things about Jaron Hall, and he was impressive in the Cardinals preseason game in the first half when he was actually with the second team offensive line. And also he's had his moments during training camp, and I'm not ready to say that he's going to be the guy post Kirk Cousins, whenever that is going to be, although I think that Kirk is certainly a betting favorite to be extended past the 2023 season, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. But he'll be in the sphere. He'll certainly be in the mix and be interesting. Next up, only 8 offensive linemen. Now, this one stuck out like a sore thumb because Vikings carrying 8 O-linemen: Darisaw, Ezra, Bradbury, Ed Ingram, O'Neal, and then Schlutman, Brandel, and Udo as your 3 backups. But most teams carry 9 to 10 offensive linemen on the 53, and I think it shows that the Vikings are probably going to make a move, either a waiver claim or a free agent signing. Dalton Risner one time, or there's a bunch of very intriguing prospects and projects along the offensive line that have just been let go, and also the fact that the Vikings traded Darian Lowe to the Patriots probably meant that he wasn't going to make the 53. So the Vikings are playing a little bit of go fish in terms of some of the backup offensive line depth or starting offensive line. Next up, takeaway number 3. Short-term injured reserve candidates. So you really do hate to say it, but the way that some of the health issues have been going along, guys like King Kene, who's missed about a month of training camp and missed all of preseason, TJ Hawkinson with the ear infection and then the lower back stiffness. Is he going to be ready for week 1? I think that's a question that's burning in the back of the... trying to think of like a analogy. Can't. But that's something that's simmering on the back burner. And also, Lewis Seen, who had that soft tissue injury at walkthroughs ahead of the Arizona preseason game. Does that mean that they'll potentially be on short-term IR? I wouldn't rule it out, but we'll see what happens next week as teams actually do have to file injury reports. What a novel concept before they get ready for the Buccaneers. But, that's the thing, sort of a piece of trickeration that teams do use, because if you place a player on injured reserve before 53-man cutdowns, that's season ending. But if they're on the 53-man roster through waiver claims, then you could put them on short-term injured reserve, and then they miss a minimum of 3 games. Then go from there. Next up, takeaway number 4. 4 tight ends means... a couple things. Number 1, Nick Muse was a beast, man. Like, he was looking good in training camp. Obviously was really good as a receiver as well as a run blocker. So he definitely earned his 53-man roster spot. Last year's 7th-round pick, spent most of the season on the practice squad. And also, maybe they're prepping for some time without Hawkinson, whether that be injury or hell, maybe they trade TJ Hawkinson. I don't know. There's lots of options on the table right now, absent him getting his contract extension done. But Oliver and Munt, I'm perfectly fine with that. Also, it says that the Vikings are going to incorporate quite a bit of 12 personnel, which they have throughout training camp as well as preseason, running multiple tight end looks. Next up, number 5. 6 safeties. So one of the things that stands out is that the Vikings did roster 6 safeties. Harrison, Bynum, Metellus are your 3 starters. Lewis Seen Is he going to be good to go with that injury? TBD. But Jay Ward, carry on my Jay Ward son, the 5th round pick out of LSU, had himself a big-time game against Arizona. Theo Jackson played great all throughout preseason. Last year, UDFA out of Tennessee. So I think it just came down to maybe some concern about Lewis's health, as well as Ward and Jackson. The Vikings didn't want to risk putting one of them through waivers and trying to get them down on the practice squad, so they just rostered 6. And also the fact that all right, so we'll talk about it. Next up, 4 cornerbacks. So only 4 corners on the roster. Now, I hear what you're saying, 5, but Najee Thompson doesn't really play corner. He's a special teams ace, and he's going to be phenomenal at that. But if you look at it this way, so most teams carry 10 defensive backs, but it's usually 6 corners and 4 safeties, but the Vikings just flip-flop that. But also it speaks to usage, because the Vikings are going to roll out 3 safeties quite a bit with Smith and Beasley and Metellus. Also, Metellus is basically a de facto slot cornerback. I think that factors in. Also, Cameron Bynum was a college cornerback, so that potentially tips the scales a little bit too. Or, I mean, the Vikings could be in the market for adding some cornerback depth. Maybe Duke Shelley, maybe Darius Rush. There's a lot of names that were let go during 53-man cutdowns. Next up, number 7. 3 UDFAs making the 53 is impressive. Now, it feels like Ivan Pace Jr. Ivan Pace Jr. is so good that it's almost boring, where we stopped talking about Mr. Mankato and the Earl of Egan because he just ran away with it. I think it was the most lopsided win in the history of the award. Carter II, who we'll get to, I mean, that was sort of a given. And Najee Thompson, that's a fantastic story. You love to see it. And also, the Vikings roster, it's not like they're bottom of the barrel and it's very easy for UDFAs to make the roster. No, you got to be good. I mean, because this team offensively and the defense is rising, so it's tough to make this team. So, hats off to Pace Jr., Ivan Carter, Andre Carter II, as well as Najee Thompson. Next up, number 8. Speaking of Carter II, so Carter II started out in the PUP, and he was sort of whatever in the 2 preseason games, whereas Luigi Villain, last year's UDFA out of Wake Forest by way of Michigan, and he was really damn good. But I think it just came down to money. So the Vikings gave Carter the second $340K guaranteed, and I think that he would be intriguing enough that maybe it would be tough for him to get through waivers, maybe not, but Luigi Villain, they're probably a little bit more confident of him getting through, so that's what I think it came down to. Next up, number 9, they're confident in Madison and Chandler. Now, King Kene, I think that there's a strong chance that he could be on short-term IR with his undisclosed injury. They did waive 7th-round pick Dwayne McBride, who probably is going to end up on the practice squad. Now, they could certainly add a veteran running back like James Robinson, who was waived by the Giants, or Kareem Hunt, who they tried out earlier in the year. But I think there was some concern about Madison's health, but I think that's off to the side. I think Ty Chandler is very firmly the Vikings running back too. I love watching him operate, especially in the passing game, which is fantastic. And lastly, takeaway number 10 from the Vikings' initial 53-man roster, Jalen Rager is here for now. Now, there's a lot of wide receiver needy teams out there, and Jalen, yes, he does have that first-round pedigree. Yes, he had himself a great camp and great preseason, and I think that he's just going to be jammed down on the depth chart because he got Jefferson, Addison, KJ. I think Brandon Powell is going to be in that mix. Jalen Naylor, this coaching staff obviously loves. So, I mean, I think that if the Vikings do get offered, say, a 5th-round pick for Jalen, I think that he's gone. I think that he really would be. And also, he kept guys like Tristan Jackson off of the 53. So I think there's a chance that if they do trade Jalen Rager, that Tristan Jackson is brought back, or at minimum on the practice squad. But we'll see what happens there. But that's it. That's 10 takeaways from the Vikings' initial 53-man roster. Let us know your thoughts and our thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe for daily Vikings takes. Want to support the work? Put a little something in the Venmo, but till next time, Skull Production Value.